Could you build a business that's better for our planet? That's what I have set out to answer. Hi, I'm Marco Pimentel, marketing expert and entrepreneur, and host of the podcast Someone Like You. I become fascinated in finding creative climate solutions in business, and on the podcast, I break down how founders and CEOs are building climate-friendly business solutions that are opportunities for growth while being better for the planet.
Items typically have an unimpeded, almost frictionless slide to the landfill in present day. And what we're trying to do at Rheaply is give them second, third, fourth, and fifth lives so that we can reduce carbon emissions from that new procurement and manufacturing and divert a lot of waste from landfill. And if we can do both those things, not only do we hit a lot of important climate and sustainability goals, we just make our communities and our businesses much more efficient. We don't spend things that we don't need to spend. We're not waiting long wait times from a supply chain perspective.
It's estimated about 70% of carbon emissions can be decreased by just transitioning to a circular economy. Today's guest is Garry Cooper. He's the CEO and co-founder of Rheaply, a service company that specializes in enterprise asset management technology for the circular economy. Garry was doing his PhD in neuroscience at Northwestern University in a really well-resourced lab when he noticed a friend's lab with less resources that could benefit from certain items his lab had, but just didn't need them. I get to speak with Garry on how his DIY resource sharing program at Northwestern led him to develop his idea for Rheaply, how Rheaply aims to create the experience of getting rid and finding items that look new but just aren't as exciting as shopping for new products, and that you don't really need to be a climate scientist to get started with your sustainable business idea. With the mission of building circularity for every business, Rheaply is paving the way to making circularity accessible, trendy, and sustainable. I wanted to take a second to tell you about our Season 2 sponsor, Digital Scope. Did you know your website has a carbon footprint? Well, digital technology has a larger carbon footprint than the entire aviation industry, and it's only getting bigger. Digital power consumption is increasing by 9% every year. At this rate, our digital carbon footprint could be responsible for as much as 14% of global emissions by 2040. If you're a digital-first company, or really any company with a website, and want to understand the impact your website is having on the environment, Digital Scope can translate visitor data into carbon measurement, all with a simple one line of code added to your website. Check out digitalscope.com/someonelikeyu. The first 100 people to sign up get free access for an entire year. Garry, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I'd like to kind of get to the beginning, and I think what's really interesting today and to discuss with you, and I was fortunate to listen to your TED Talk recently, is the connection to climate and to what you've built at Rheaply is, it's just kind of this classic entrepreneur just making your, this vision and this idea just kind of come to life from really something that, wasn't a traditional path. And so what I'd love to kind of get started with is just understanding a bit of your background and, was there any correlation to thinking I'm going to be like a climate leader in entrepreneurship? How did that happen, and how did that kind of come to be?
Well, one, thanks, Marco, for having me. No, I was never. I don't think I ever in my PhD and my postdoc and the work that I did after my postdoctoral fellowship, I never had in my mind, being in the climate space, being in sustainability. But I think that's actually what I traditionally see, actually, with a lot of what Mark Benioff calls ecopreneurs, is that you are working wherever you're working in supply chain world, the real estate world, in finance, and there's something that hits you that could be meaningful from a sustainability climate perspective, and you just pursue it, right? Not ever having gone to school for sustainability or the like. So that's kind of my story. But to your point, to kind of back up, it's actually just a really practical issue. So I about a decade ago, I was at Northwestern University in Chicago, and I was doing a PhD in neuroscience, working on Parkinson's disease drug discovery. And I happened to be in a pretty decently well-funded laboratory. And when you have a lot of funding in labs, you have to buy stuff with that funding, or the government takes some money back from you. So we had lots of stuff, lots of antibodies, chemicals, PPE, microscopy things, lasers. I mean, you name it, we had it. Meanwhile, there were friends of mine in other labs, literally on the same floor. Now, these labs being smaller with less funding and less resources, who needed the stuff that we weren't using in our lab. But we didn't know that they needed it, and they didn't know that we had it. So what we would do then is we would store or throw things away that we didn't need, and they would buy things when we could be sharing them. So I started a small program at Northwestern where I would just place the things that we no longer need in my lab on a cart, push the cart around the floor once a month, share the things with other labs that we weren't using. And people like that. And it's not really Einsteinian to share things with colleagues. But it turns out when I left the university, people would email me like, Gary, where's the cart? Haven't seen you in a long time. And I'd say, well, I'm not there anymore. But it made me think of, okay, how can we create sharing, or better said, reuse? How can we create reuse at scale and beyond a cart and beyond a single point of failure like a person? And so when we started asking that question, it kind of led us to technology and trying to build technology to help large organizations with reuse. Almost every organization who's serious about sustainability has a recycling program. But recycling is kind of like the best thing to do just before landfill, right? There's this whole other reduce and reuse. And so we were thinking, but how do you operationalize reuse? So when we started asking questions about that, we really ran into carts and spreadsheets and kind of, I would say, non-scalable solutions. And we decided to build one, and that one became Rheaply.
So you're pushing a cart around. This kind of puts a bit of a bug around, equipment that should be just reused, sitting around. And I'm kind of just thinking in my head right now, just like our office space where we would always have like lots of old chairs that maybe we needed to get new ones, or lots
Oh,
of
yeah.
monitors, that type of thing. So when you left Northwestern, was the next step to be, I'm going to start this and start building the tech? Or was it, were you working somewhere else and just kind of said, oh, I'll kind of do this on the side of my desk? How did you take that kind of next step from that kind of cart idea?
Yeah, so the next step, so when I left the university after my postdoc, I worked in supply chain, mostly at Ernst & Young. And I was helping biotechnology and biopharmaceutical companies with various supply chain issues, mostly in Europe. So there were similar issues, maybe at a different scale, obviously, than when I saw at a university that I was seeing with those organizations, which is, what do we have? Where is it? What condition is it? Who needs it next? Right. And so one of the things so I had in my mind that there's something here, but like a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when you're in a new space, I didn't know how to get started. I wasn't a technologist myself, so I couldn't really build it myself. I didn't know anything about the venture markets. There's a kind of a lot of unknowns, and there was a glimmer of an idea. So it didn't really help me get started, to be honest. One of the catalyzing um, things was my relationship with one of my co-founders. So we're best friends, and I think we had always been searching for a project to do together. But man, I must have pitched him, 7, 8 ideas over the 9 years that we were friends up until that point. And every single one of them, he was like, that's dumb. Yeah, I'm sorry to tell you, Gary, it's a really dumb idea. you know. And I remember we were at a bar and I got an email, another one of these emails from a Northwestern person saying, Gary, where's the cart? And I showed him the email. And he goes, not bad. Now, not bad doesn't sound like that great a validation, but given the history of him saying this is a stupid idea, not bad was such a step function of victory for me. So I was like, oh. So we left that bar. We went back to his apartment at midnight, and we just started writing, like, at the time we were calling it like a reuse program in a box, or internal marketplace to a large organization. So we just started like writing down, is someone doing this? What are some of the immediate thoughts that come to our mind? And really, the concept was born at that time, and we've continued to iterate on it since.
Because I can imagine that when you think about large organizations or hospitals or labs, like you're talking about just piles and piles of stuff, especially these
Yes.
offices that have like thousands of employees. And from the companies that you meet and talk to, and when you were starting to do this kind of research, were you finding that they had this stuff, but they didn't really like, did they have a document type of list? Was it like an account for accounting purposes, like for depreciation, or
Hmm.
like, did they have anything that people could kind of see or catalog and understand what they had?
Yeah, it's kind of a two-prong observation. Either organizations that we started working with had literally every system you can think of. I mean, we've gone to organizations that have 16 different platforms tracking certain things. But when you just ask a simple question, okay, I'm going to go buy a new chair, and I want to make sure there isn't a chair that's in surplus at the organization before I buy the chair. As an employee, what do I do? Even amidst the 16 platforms that they have, that's unanswered. And then we would have another type of organization. I won't say them because they're a great client right now. But before they were a client of ours, we said, same question. If I were an employee looking for X at your organization, how would I know if it already exists somewhere? And the guy pointed to his brain because he said, I know where everything is. I will say that this company is a Fortune 50 company. So somehow this one guy literally knows where every single item is across this 100,000 person organization. So we found either they had no system and there was a human, or there'd be many systems, none of which talk to each other, none of which actually were helping drive more visibility and usability or utilization of the physical things that the company had already procured. They would, to your point, they would track depreciation. They might track when maintenance is needed. There might be kind of, depending on the type of item, there might be other government regulations and things that they would need to track. If it's chemicals or flammables or something like this from an OSHA perspective, at least here in the United States. But there really wasn't an internal catalog. Like, here's all our stuff. Go see if we have it before you purchase it. But if you think about a world without waste, right? If you think about trying to purchase things that you actually need and not things that you are purchasing because you just don't have the right systems to make visible everything you own, it seemed like there was just such an opportunity to drive visibility to what a company buys and then help them reuse it internally. And what we found in doing that in the early days is there's for sure an opportunity there, but there's even a broader opportunity, not to just drive visibility to what they already own, and help them reuse it internally, but then help them find the happy home after they are done with it, with as much community and sustainability positive impact as possible. So, it's been a really cool learning lesson. But yeah, as you say, that there are lots of platforms that predate us, but they typically are financial tools, maintenance tools, maybe some tools from compliance or the guy's head, but none of them are really focused on kind of reprocurement. Like, how can everyone in the company know what we have and then find it if they need to use it? And so that's kind of the space that we kind of found ourselves into, and I think we continue to lead.
And on the other side, have you found that, often I'm thinking of like an office space or an organization that moves to a new space, and at that time that tends to be this kind of let's purchase a bunch of stuff that's new. Now, what do we do with all of this old stuff? What typically happens there, and this allows that company to catalog and either sell this or to donate, or like, how does that part work where there is a surplus of things that they no longer need?
Yeah, so it's actually really cool. So the linear economy, right? So the take, make, and waste economy, the one in which we live in today, presupposes that when you buy something, so first of all, that you need to buy something new, and then to fill a need. And then it presupposes that the thing that was currently fulfilling that need should be wasted, should be landfilled. And not just me, a lot of people who have bought in and who are building the building blocks for this thing called the circular economy really don't think that that's the case. So, in the example that you just talked about, what normally happens on a job site is if we're renovating a floor and there's stuff on that floor, we're going to call a guy in to get rid of it. Um, Sometimes that guy or that company will sell you that they're going to get rid of it sustainably, and they don't. At least you have no traceability that they did. And sometimes not. They'll just give you, a dime on a dollar in value, and take all the stuff away, and it's not a headache for you, and you can put your new stuff in. That is linear to its T. And what we try to do at Rheaply and try to help promote is, okay, we're going to renovate this space. First of all, can we reuse any of the furniture that we have here? And maybe it's older, right? Maybe it needs to be touched up, needs to be a little bit remanufactured. We have remanufacturers on our platform. So you can send your old furniture out. It can be spruced up and you can get it back again with little carbon emissions and zero waste. Or you can source really cool things on our platform. So you could say, hey, we're going to renovate this space. Let's say you're in San Francisco, and there's a beam, a wooden beam that was part of the original Bay Bridge construction, right? So this is a piece of wood that's been supporting the bridge connecting Oakland and San Francisco. That might be a cool piece to have in your office space for many reasons. You can fashion it however you want to. You can get that on our platform for very cheap, and also, again, with zero new carbon and helping divert a lot of waste. So our thinking has been, how can we make the experience of getting rid of things and finding things that are new looking but aren't new materials or new products as easy and enjoyable as it is currently to either discard or buy new things? That's what we've really been working on at Rheaply, because we want people to have the same kind of experience. We just want them to start with sustainable materials or reused or recycled materials. And, we continue to work on that. But really, to answer your question squarely, items typically have an unimpeded, almost frictionless slide to the landfill in present day. And what we're trying to do at Rheaply is give them second, third, fourth, and fifth lives so that we can reduce carbon emissions from that new procurement and manufacturing and divert a lot of waste from landfill. And if we can do both those things, not only do we hit a lot of important climate and sustainability goals, we just make our communities and our businesses much more efficient. We don't spend things that we don't need to spend. We're not waiting long wait times from a supply chain perspective. So it's both about the circularity or sustainability portion, but it's also about the economic portion. And we think the circular economy deserves first-class technology to help it compete with the linear economy.
Yeah, and I'm based on the west coast of Canada, and I think there is some new legislation on renovations and new construction where, if you're doing anything on the old side, all of the old wood now has to be taken and resold and refurbished. It can't just go straight to the landfill, because it's great material that could be reused, and there's no point of throwing it out.
Mm-hmm.
So to go back though to this bar moment with your friend that kind of says just says not bad. What was next? Like, how did you go from kind of idea to first customers? Like, how did you get this thing funded and start building it? And what was that kind of like?
Yeah, so I think everything starts with your people and team. So the very first move we made was, I had a skill set of, I am a scientist, nerd. I had been in, software sales, kind of in consulting, and also in consulting for about 3-4 years. So, I'd sold and installed my bit of ERP systems and other. And so we had that component. He's a front-end engineer and designer. But what we really needed to kind of round us out, if you will, just as a very, very small team, is we needed like a back end engineer. And so it just so happened that a person that my early co-founder, had been working with for about 4 years at his current job was, a back end engineer who had been in the game for, a decade and a half plus. And they had been working together for some time. And so they had a kind of good pull push relationship, if you will. And so we pitched him on giving up his job, which was paying him very well, and he had a very good 9 to 5 life, to go down a journey of never having a 9 to 5 again, and not making a lot of money, but to build software that could impact every business in a positive way, impact every community. And I remember the dinner as though it was yesterday. And he said yes immediately. I mean, I think he really wanted to continue working with my co-founder, his business colleague at the time. But he was very empathetic to the idea. And so us three, co-founded the company. We just had our little birthday, June 11th, 2015. And then from June 11th, 2015 till about October 2016, we just worked nights, mostly weekends, but a few nights for that year or so, just working on like what is this business vision and what will be our revenue model and what would be the initial product offering and what will we charge, what would be our pricing structure. And then I had to start thinking about how do we finance this business? Right. I had never fundraised before. I didn't have a network in tech at that time. And so there's just like what should we call the company? I mean, there's many questions that we would try to answer in these, we would meet up on Sundays. So around October or end of September of 2016, I was able to raise enough money for about 14 months of operation. And we decided as a group that we can't have people's hard-earned money, which, by the way, took me about 10 months to raise, which was incredibly hard. But we said we can't have people's money and not be full-time. So November 1 of 2016, we all three had our first day at Rheaply.
Every week on Someone Like You, we dive into stimulating conversations with founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and the likes who are consciously and successfully creating sustainable business solutions for the long haul. Tune in every week for a new inspiring conversation on leading climate solutions. And if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget, please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give us a rating and a review. And platform gets built, you're all three full-time, you've established a name and brand. What was the first kind of clients and what was how did you start to kind of get this in traditional software beta tested or getting the first kind of customers on?
Yeah, so what we told investors who invested in that round in 2016 was we're going to do three things. We're going to build in our first year, we're going to build an MVP, minimal viable product, and we're going to do that. We're going to sell it to. So the second thing we're going to do is we're going to onboard one organization as a beta customer, and then the third thing is we were going to transition one beta customer to a paying customer. Those are the three things we kind of told investors, which we thought were ambitious for a year. And we were able to do it in 9 months, right? So we were able to launch sometime in the early Q1 of 2017. And then we had our first paying customer mid Q2 of 2017, calendar year 2017. And that was a university. So, I saw this issue, right, back in my PhD. And so we said, let's go back to where Garry saw the problem. So we went to a university, medical school, did a lot of great work with them. Actually, that work was published and highlighted in Nature, which is the largest peer-reviewed journal in scientific research. And so because it was in Nature, other universities started looking at us. And so we were able to start working with other universities in Chicago. And I specifically remember at one of the conversations we were having with our first beta university, they said, hey, this is great. Like, we now know where stuff is in our departments. We can see who has it, what condition it's in, all these things. But what happens when no one wants it at our organization? Like, what do we do with it then? I'm like, oh, that's a great point. What happens when no one can reuse it internally? So then we thought, oh, wait, we're connecting all of these organizations on the same platform, right? One organization has a reuse program. Another organization has a reuse program. How can we connect them if they can't reuse those items internally? Can't we just connect them? And so then that is kind of brought about this entire other part of our business. So not only do we help with internal reuse, but we help with next home. So when an item can't be used internally, can it be resold to another organization? Can it be donated to another organization, or should it just be recycled? And so now what we have on the platform is we have outlets and inflows for all of those products when an organization is no longer finds these items useful internally. And so we just kind of like, we can manage all the next life or the end of life for products all through the technology, which I think, it becomes a really whole solution for organizations who want to manage their items cradle to cradle, but also want to manage them at the highest value they can possibly extract, and then immediately get rid of them when they no longer need it. So we're able to do it not just onesie twosie now, but also just at scale. Tens of thousands of items at the same time. So it's been quite kind of a progression. But yeah, it started with just like going back to the universities and listening to users and trying to be as helpful as possible.
And have you had to, obviously being published in Nature in that article, you get this publicity in a very natural way. Has it been difficult to expand your market to other universities or other corporations or hospitals, research labs, or have you found that the word of mouth and has been strong enough? Like how difficult has it been to build the scale that you've been able to get?
It's I wouldn't say it's difficult. I did a PhD, and so for 8 years I basically sat in the basement and thought about Parkinson's disease and finding a drug. So when I think about it compared to like the rigor that took, not so difficult. But it's a process. We're still figuring it out. I think we're definitely, we're 100% still a startup. There's a learning every day, but I think we have a culture where that's embraced, where we want to learn, we want to grow. Because if we don't build a circular economy, we have no hope to net zero. We have to, if the Ellen MacArthur Foundation published what I think one of the most seminal white papers in this space in 2019 with Google. And what they were able to show is that if we electrify the entire grid, if we get rid of all the cows, right, and if we get rid of all the internal combustion engines, we only reduce global carbon emissions by up to 55%. The other 45% comes from scaling a circular economy. Because at the very end of things, we just consume too much on the planet. We just consume too much. So it's an important thing that Rheaply or any company in this space is able to be successful in keeping with the world that I think that we all are trying to get to, which is a world of net zero. So when I think about how hard it's been, I think about the kind of end goal is a really hard end goal. So it's actually been kind of easy in the back of that. But no, just like any product in a new space, new category, new founder, you're going to face funding issues. And when you don't have resources or availability to resources, you make all kind of weird company decisions in the in-between times. And so I tell you, the first 4.5 years of the company, in aggregate, I hadn't raised $1 million. Nowadays, you could put an idea on a piece of paper, and someone give you $500,000 if it's a good enough idea. Literally, we had Google as a customer, and we're doing all these things, and I couldn't raise an aggregate, like over the 4.5 years, $1 million. So it's just really hard to operate a business at the scale of Google, starting out with a new product and a new product space, with that being your reality. I think that's one thing. The second thing is what I always say: the linear economy forces are a strong force. People are very used to buying things and just losing them. That's the main problem, by the way, with circular economy, is that at the point of sale, when we buy stuff, we immediately almost always lose track of what we bought. It gets in the world, and we're no longer sure where it's at. So I think because the motion of circular economy is so known to people, consumers, both business and personal consumers, and also just the fact that it's a new product, new founder, new company, new product space, for sure there's been headwinds. Not to mention the macro things that have happened in the world, from civil unrest in the United States to COVID, obviously, globally, to the macroeconomic conditions that we find ourselves. But I say this one thing: here we are, right? We've made it through. We figured out a way, and I'd say, a lot of people think that we're leading this space, and I think I'm extremely grateful for the learnings and all the way through.
And you've had a lot of success along the way as well, and you've raised a round that was, I think, about $20 million. So you've come a long way. When you think about the next 3 to 5 years for Rheaply, where do you think this can go, and what is the vision behind it?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of steps. So if the vision of Rheaply is circularity for every business. So right now, what I've been describing is we've been working with lots of large companies, have a lot of physical assets, very meaty, very important sustainability and climate goals, and needing to be able to report against them. But if you start to think about how do we actually get to zero, it's not just if the top 100 companies in the world get their stuff together, if you will. If they adopt circular principles and circular economy principles, it's actually the bottom thousands of companies, right? So I think one vision that we for sure have is how do we get Rheaply to go down market, help with mid cap, small cap manufacturers and companies who see maybe more the efficiency story than they see the sustainability story, but it all comes along with it to help them run their businesses more efficiently, more circular, and by the way, divert a lot of waste and avoid a lot of carbon emissions. So we think that's one bit, is to actually live out our vision statement, which is circularity for every business. I think beyond that, I would like to see it easy for any consumer to shop sustainably. If you, as a procurement specialist or a sourcing manager in a company, all the way to just your home life, if you want to go find a chair that didn't cost you any new carbon emissions, or a t-shirt if you're at home, or whatever it is, right? Whatever the item is, it's incredibly hard to do that right now. You have to be so intentional. And so I think our broader vision is to make shopping sustainably, whether it's be in business or at home, not a hard thing to do. In fact, a preferred and easy thing to do. And so I think we're trying to build almost in some ways a reverse Amazon, where we're trying to find, I like to say, we're Google mapping the working world. So we need to know where everything is. But if we know where everything is, or where most things are, we know when people are going to get rid of them. And then we can start bringing in markets to those items. And so we kind of create almost like a re-commerce of illiquid assets. And we think that could be, well, I know it could, a $4 trillion economic opportunity globally. So we think it's a huge opportunity, and we'll continue to do our best to try to make it real.
And does your business model work alongside going down market as well, assuming it's a platform fee or a percentage fee of anything that's exchanged or sold? Is that how that works? Yeah.
Yeah, so the way to think about our model right now is that depending on how much material is how much the licensing fee costs. So if you have, let's say at our very entry level package, if you say you have 10,000 items that you need to manage, let's just say I don't know the net number, but I know I don't own more than 10,000 items. The idea is to make that price point very digestible for a small business owner who might have 10,000 items. And by the way, also Google or Microsoft or the U.S. airports, they might also have 10,000 items that they want to start with. So it's just bringing that parity. It's just kind of almost essentially creating new package structures that are on the kind of left side of the scale, so that we can kind of go down market and be very helpful, but all the same platform functionality, all the support that we offer on the services end as well. So we've built a product and we built a business model to easily be able to help us go down market. We just gotta do it, honestly.
We do, and we're kind of getting to the end of our time, and I wanted to just ask around some advice for entrepreneurs or people that are thinking about getting involved in the climate or sustainability space. This podcast is a lot of the kind of the branding and the inspiration came from the children's book, The Lorax, and it's kind of this idea of like, this is what we've done. How do we fix it? And so, what would you say to somebody that is listening and thinking about getting involved?
I love this question. Hear me out, audience. Hear me out. The very most important thing in my mind to do is to start. Start by writing it on a piece of paper. Then start by writing more on that piece of paper. Then start by sharing that idea with a friend. Then sharing that idea with a founder. I think the most important thing to starting any business in the startup land, in particular, ones in the sustainability or environmental climate space, is to just literally get started. Beyond that, I think my advice is you don't have to be a climatologist to run a successful climate business. I think the most important thing is you have to have insight and passion. What my PhD and what graduate school essentially taught me is to have passion and ownership of a problem that I'm trying to solve. So I'm very passionate about how do we have a working world without waste, right? I'm very passionate about that question. So I'm interested in learning more about it. So while some people, when I enter this market, some people might have known more about me, I'm not going to let anyone learn faster than me. And that's something that we also talk about in our company is we're going to be the fastest learners in the market. So I would say never be intimidated. If you see a problem, if the problem is not yours alone, go build a solution for it. And then the third thing I would say on the end of this is to find I know it's a founder partner or founder friend. Find someone who's been in the startup landscape, who's actually worked inside or founded a startup. They will be invaluable to you because, at least for me, I had a huge network in kind of the research science space, but I didn't really know anyone in tech, or at least not directly. It wasn't a world that I was really a part of. And in the United States, as an African American gentleman, there's literally 0 to 1% of us are represented in both the venture and startup landscape. So it's very easy to be like, I don't see myself there, or I'm not sure, I don't have a network there. What I'd encourage is just go to your LinkedIn. I'm sure there's someone who you graduated with who's worked at a startup or who started one. Literally take that person out to dinner 3 times and write down everything that they tell you. That would be my third bit of advice.
Yeah, and when somebody says not bad, take that as a good sign.
That's right. Take all the positive signals. I used to say there's always a train of no's. Everyone's going to tell you no because change is hard, but there has to be people who believe enough that a better day is ahead and can bridge where we are today to that better day with some level of new solution. So don't be scared of people saying no to you 9 times, even if they're your best friend. Keep pursuing. Find something that you're passionate about. You know, write it down. Make progress on it. Find friends who can help support you and kind of give you, seasoned advice. And don't be scared to be a new learner. I think it's invigorating.
Where can listeners find you or more information about Rheaply?
Oh my gosh, please find us at Rheaply.com, which is RHEAPLY.com. If not, we're at Rheaply Inc. INC on literally every social media platform. I have a boring handle, so my handle is just my whole name. So it's just Garry Cooper Jr. 2 R's in Gary. You can find me on Twitter, where I'm not knowing what I'm doing, but mostly on LinkedIn. And would love to talk about circular economy or use and how we save the planet by being more cost and consumptive conscious.
Yeah, and you have a great newsletter on LinkedIn, so people should check that out as well. So
yes, the sustainable business.
Yeah. Garry, thank you so much for joining us. I when I think about stories from these entrepreneurs or people listening about how to get involved, from pushing a cart, working on Parkinson to now, Rheaply growing like it is today, that's an incredible story. And I think you're a spitting image of what people need to be trying to aspire to. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. And let's go build something.
This podcast is co-produced with The Brand is Female. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Someone Like You. And if you did, please share this. We're a new podcast, and I would love it if you could share it with a family member, friend, colleague, work colleague. Share it on Slack, whoever you do. Just share and spread the message of these incredible brands. Please also support these type of companies. They're doing the hard thing, and the hard thing often takes a lot of people to get on board. And don't forget, please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give us a rating and review. I'm Marco Pimentel. Thank you for joining us today. For more information on Someone Like You, you can find us on Instagram at Someone Like You Podcast, with all the links to the podcast, our website, and more information about the brands that we feature. Thank you again.